Hello, and welcome to the first episode in what's going to be a fairly long series. In this series, we're going to cover database development, design, and structured query language, SQL. The episodes will be hosted by myself, Tech Prof, and I look forward to working with a lot of you. So the focus of this course is going to be around concepts about databases, but concepts that are specific to software developers, so computer programmers, programmer analysts, as well as web and mobile app developers. So this course is going to focus towards new programmers, computer programming students who may be in a college or university course right now, web developers who need to add a database to their website to feed information, as well as individuals who may be interested in a future database career, and they just want to get some information about what a database is all about and see if that really does pique their interest. This course is not for database administrators. That is a totally different topic. We are not going to dive that deep into database servers, administration, backups, security, and all that. We're going to be very light on the database administrative tasks. One of the focuses of this course will be attention to details. So some famous quotes. The difference between something good and something great is attention to detail. That's a quote by an author named Charles Swindoll. And our good friend Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, says, "Details matter. It's worth waiting to get it right." And that's what I'm going to focus on in this series. We're going to talk about a lot of different ways to design databases. And the focus here is a lot of people aren't database developers and they just throw something together that works. And then you run into all kinds of problems later. So this series is going to focus on getting it right the first time. So some of the course objectives, we've got quite a few here. As I said, it's going to be a long series. So some of the objectives that people who watch the series should be able to do by the end. We're going to install and maintain a development copy of a database server. We're going to do this for both Oracle Express and SQL Server Developer or Express. Developer is a free database server by Microsoft that is available for databases as long as it is not a production server. And Express is a lightweight one, so if you have a laptop or you're running on an older computer, Express might be the better way to go. I'm personally going to use SQL Developer in this series, but everything that applies to SQL Developer will also apply to SQL Express as far as the computer programmer focus goes. You're also going to be able to access and connect to the server through a graphical user interface. And in this case, we're going to talk about Oracle SQL Developer, and we're going to be using SQL Server Management Studio. So for a lot of the things that we do in database design and development, it will be the same in both Oracle and SQL Server, but there is some areas of SQL that is different between Oracle and SQL Server. And a lot of that will near the end of the course when we're talking about stored procedures triggers, user-defined functions, where Oracle has an extended language called PLSQL, where SQL Server basically just uses straight up SQL. You're going to run creation scripts. We have a sample database we're going to use for this series, and I'm going to provide that database to you. So there'll be a creation script which you're going to want to execute if you're going to follow along throughout the series. I'm going to teach you how to write efficient SQL queries and basic CRUD statements. CRUD standing for create, read, update, and delete, where you're going to extract data, create reports, and also manipulate data from a writing perspective. You're going to learn some advanced data manipulation language statements. These are going to involve statements that have multiple tables, and we're going to use joins. We're going to talk about both ANSI 89 joins and ANSI 92 joins, or simple or natural joins versus inner and outer joins. We're going to do grouping and aggregation. So one of the most important questions that people ask in business is, how much money did I make today? Which means you need to add things up, and that's what aggregation comes in. So there are aggregation functions built into SQL for summing, for counting, for averages, and those kind of things. Then we're going to talk about subqueries and views and how they're related to each other, and how can we build really complex SQL queries using subqueries. And lastly, we'll talk about set operators, the good old faithful union, intersect, and minus that we learned back in high school under set operators, or sets and Venn diagrams. We're also going to talk about design concepts. So how do we take business objectives or business rules and apply them into the design of the database. Talk about the database development lifecycle and how we go through the process of developing a database. Determining what dependencies we have between different sets of data and how those dependencies affect the business workflow. We'll talk about normalization, which is a process to eliminate dependencies from the database that aren't directly relational. And then we'll also have a section on creating your own creation scripts so that you can create scripts like the one that you've used to install the sample database. Lastly, how to implement that database. So how to go about writing the code to create those tables, create the foreign keys, create the referential integrity and the relationships within the database from the design process. Going to write data definition language statements in SQL. So those will include creating tables, views, and other database objects, altering those database objects after they've already been created, replacing them if they need to be replaced, dropping them or deleting them, as well as the concept of temporary tables and how do they fit into database design and how can we use them in the real world to assist with being efficient, feeding data to and from websites and mobile devices and those kind of things, and how do we use them as well to import or to migrate databases from an old database to a new database. We're going to design and create user-defined functions, stored procedures, triggers that are going to automate a lot of the tasks that happen in the database, as well as looking at architecture and different things that we can build within the database or different objects we can generate within the database, which will help us collaborate with our software or feed our software so that we can balance the architecture behind what's done in the software and what's done in the database. So in this series, we're going to cover Oracle Express and SQL Server Developer, or SQL Server Express will also do. And also, it's important to remember that all of the concepts that we're doing here under the SQL and the programming perspective will port really nicely to other relational databases such as MySQL and PostgreSQL. There are many, many databases out there, and they all have their role, but the main ones we're going to focus on are Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL, PostgreSQL. A DBMS, a database management system, is made up of one or more programs that work together. So it's important that you understand that when we install different pieces of the software, we're installing one piece of an entire system that works together. A database administrator is responsible for maintaining the server itself. And in smaller companies, they actually quite often get involved with developing and designing the databases themselves. In larger companies, DBAs are the only people who have access to the databases. In smaller companies, you get people who have multiple roles. So let's start by looking at how a simplistic database management system is set up. So typically we'd have a database server. So in the context of Oracle and SQL Server, this is the actual database server, the physical hardware or software location where the data itself is actually stored, or the home of the database itself. This could be multiple servers that work concurrently together, or it can be a single server in smaller companies and smaller situations. Typically in companies, only senior DBAs will have access to that main server. You can connect to that main server through the network in the company internal router that will then connect to the development computers. So SQL Developer, SQL Management Studio, Visual Studio, web and mobile application development tools will all be installed on the development computers. And that's where junior DBAs and programmers will work and connect to the database to write the software. The other part of a database server is connection to an application server. So this is where a web server may be housed. So an API, a web server. Quite often there'll be a firewall between these two. I haven't drawn it here in the diagram because there's different ways to do it. Then we're going to connect to another router. This will be an external router, typically with another firewall in it, where you would connect to the World Wide Web, your web applications, your mobile applications. So this series is going to involve somewhere between 50 and 60 episodes. Very short in length each, but each to its own specific point. So thank you for watching. It would be great if you subscribe, so as we get the new videos in the series out, you'll get to see them. And if you liked what you saw here and you like the series and you think it's going to be great, hit that like button. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you.